The following video is a recap of the Navy career of Fredrick J Thiel Jr. He entered into the U.S. Navy December 7th, 1943, and was honorably discharged May 27th, 1946. He spent 2 years, 5 months, and 21 days in the U.S. Navy. Now the picture on the right is a picture of him at approximately age 14 with a clear indication of what he wanted to do in the future. Starting on December 6, 1943, he left Boston's North Railroad Station for boot camp at Newport, Rhode Island. Now he will tell the story of his mom taking him to the station.
I thought I'd be the only one there with my mother, and I didn't want her to go, but she went, and I'm glad she did, because there were all kinds of parents there.
Now here is the location of Newport, Rhode Island, where he went to boot camp. And as you can see, it's not very far from Boston, Massachusetts, where he grew up. So he didn't have to go very far. Now this next picture, I believe, is a picture of him just after he completed boot camp in Newport, Rhode Island. Now you got to remember, he was only 17 years old when he joined the Navy. After completing boot camp in Newport, Rhode Island, he was transferred to the Great Lakes Naval Training Station in the spring of 1944, and he was going to train in how to be a signalman, because his dad, who had been in the Navy for 4 years many years ago, told him, when you get out of boot camp, make sure you tell them you want to go to school, otherwise you'll be swabbing decks for the rest of your life. So that's what he did. He told them he wanted to go to signal school, so that is where they sent him. Again, after he completed training in Newport, Rhode Island, he was transferred to the Great Lakes Training Center here in the Chicago area, training to be a signalman. Again, he went from Newport, Rhode Island, right here, over to the Great Lakes Training Center right here, training to be a signalman. And here we have another picture of him in his sailor's uniform, and I believe this was taken just after he got out of the Great Lakes Navy Training Center in the Chicago area. And remember, he's only 17 years old. And these are some pictures that I pulled up off the internet, and I asked him if this is what he did while he was on the ships. Now remember, he was on merchant ships traveling over to Europe, and their hulls were full of goods to supply the war effort, and they would travel in convoys, and these are some of the places where he actually stood and gave signals. Here's a gal here signaling between ships as they passed by, and he said he did all this stuff. And he did this a lot, he said. He was a flasher man, or a blinky they called them. They blinked messages between ships. And this is one he said in rough seas you would wear this type of gear, which he said he didn't encounter very often. And majority of the time he just wore dungarees and a navy shirt and your hats. And he would do this occasionally, because when they traveled in convoys, they had to remain radio silent, so they always sent signals, either blinkies or by flags. These are typical pictures, he says, of how he sent pictures. Now, remember, now he was only 17 years old when he got out of signal school in the Great Lakes Training Center, and now he's going to be transferred back to Rhode Island. After signal school, he gets transferred to Norton, Rhode Island for further instructions on how to communicate between merchant and naval ships in convoys sailing between the United States and the war zone in Europe. Remember I said that the merchant ships were manned by Navy sailors to man the guns on the merchant ships, because the merchant marines didn't know how to do it, and to send signals between the warships, the United States warships protecting them, and between the merchant ships. Now he was sent back from the training center over here in Illinois back to Rhode Island, Norton, Rhode Island, for further instructions on how to communicate between merchant ships and naval ships. Again, he was part of a naval armed guard crew that served on merchant ships, manning the guns and the radios and the signals. Now here I pulled up a picture of a convoy sailing across the ocean, and I asked Dad if this what his convoys might look like, and he said yes, this is exactly what it looked like. In this particular picture I counted 25 ships, and while Dad crossed the ocean, he traveled lots of times in a bigger convoy, as we'll see as I get to more slides. Now these are just a couple more slides. Over here on the left, they're closer together and it's a little rougher water, and he said he traveled like that. And also over here, he traveled in smoother water sometimes. After he got out of his further training in Norton, Rhode Island, he made his first ocean crossing. And he went from New York City to Monmouth, England, as you can see right there. And he went on August 3rd, 1944. He was on a ship called the SS Catalina. Took him 12 days to sail. There were 33 ships in his convoy. There were 6 destroyer escorts. Okay, this is a ship similar to the SS Catalina. The SS stands for steamer ship. They made many of these ships during the war. Their hulls, again, were full of goods, full of supplies for the war effort in Europe. Now remember, these are merchant ships, and they had their own merchant crews, about 15 to 20 men. The Navy added their crews called armed guards. There were 10 Navy gunners on board with their commander, about 3 signalmen, and about 3 radio men with their commander. The gunners were trained to use the guns. And I want you to pay attention to these guns. There's one here, and there's 2, looks like 2 in the back, and one right here, and one right here. And the gunners would use those when they were attacked. So after he got over to Amman, England, he traveled back across from Amman to New York City. It was his second ocean crossing. So he went from Amman, England, back to New York. And this time it was August 24th, 1944. He's almost 18 years old. One more day and he'd be 18 years old. He was on the SS Catalina. Took him 17 days to cross. And there was 52 ships in his convoy, 2 destroyers, and 11 destroyer escorts. I'll show you what destroyers look like, and I'll show you what destroyer escorts look like. Now this is a picture of a destroyer, and if you notice, it has a number 661 on there, and it had some pretty big guns on there. And from what I understand, this number here, 661, means in sequence the number of ships they built. Now I don't know for sure if it means this is the 661st destroyer or not, but it's in a sequential number. And this is what a destroyer escort would look like. It has smaller guns on it. It's lower in the water. It can move a lot faster. They said that the destroyer escorts could actually circle the fleet while it was moving towards Europe or back. They were just really a fast ship. And of course the convoy was always traveling really slow. So these ships could just circle the ship and look for German submarines or enemy submarines. Okay, so he just finished his second crossing from Amman, England to New York. Now he's going to go on his third ocean crossing, and that one goes from New York across the ocean to Swansea, Wales, right there. This is Wales. This is Great Britain right here. This is the English Channel, and this is Ireland. On this particular day, it was September the 29th, 1944. He traveled again on the SS Catalina. It took them 11 days to cross the ocean, and there were 45 ships in their convoy, and again they were all loaded with goods in their hulls for the war effort in Europe. There were 3 destroyers and 9 destroyer escorts. Again, this is what your convoys would look like. He had 45 ships in that convoy, and in this particular picture there's only 25 ships. There's another picture of a convoy steaming along, and remember, he was just a signalman that signaled between ships. Like, he said stuff like the captain of the ship would send him a message saying, tell ship number 45 he's too close, he needs to get back in line. And those are the kind of communications. Or to another ship he would say, you're falling too far behind, speed up. Okay, so now we're on ocean crossing number 4 when he goes from Swansea, Wales, back to New York City. So he goes from Swansea, Wales, back to New York City. This was October 17th, 1944. He's almost 18 years old and 3 weeks. And he's on the SS Catalina again. Takes him 12 days to sail across the ocean. He's on 6 ships in the convoy, and just with 4 destroyer escorts. Okay, now he's in New York. He gets reassigned, and he's going to make an ocean crossing number 5. And he's going to go from New York City to San Francisco through the Panama Canal. So he starts in New York City, goes down here by Cuba, down here through the Panama Canal, and up over here to Hawaii, and then over to San Francisco. This is November 16th, 1944. He's on the SS Catalina. Takes him 33 days to sail, and that ship sails alone. Okay, now he's going to be on his ocean crossing number 6, where he goes from San Francisco to Guam. Again, he goes from San Francisco over here. He goes right directly to Guam. Here's the Hawaiian Islands, and he just passes them. And he goes right into Antiniwik Island, and then up to Guam, which is down here in the lower part. They got 3 islands in a row here. We've got Guam, Tinian Island, and Saipan, all in a row there. Now he just sailed on December 31st. That's New Year's Eve, 1944. He was on the SS Catalina. Took him 26 days, and they sailed alone. And just for a reference point, here is the island of Guam and Saipan, and this is the continent of Japan, or the island of Japan, whatever you want to call it. And that distance right here is about 1,600 miles. And again, that's just for a reference point. And this slide is a close-up picture of the island. This is Guam. They're not very far apart. This is Tinian Island right here. And this is Saipan right here. While he was traveling to Guam, he told this story here. They first stopped in Saipan and then made their way to Tinian Island, then to Guam. And he tells this story. While I anchored in Tinian Marina Islands, we were traveling from Saipan to Guam with the merchant ship escorts. I found out my cousin Bill, that's Bill Hayes, from Boston, was on board one of the other ships. Since I was a signalman, I sent a message across to the submarine tender he was on and asked the other signalman if my cousin was on board. And the answer was yes. And we arranged to meet and swam on the same beach as where the Enola Gay landed with the atomic canister.
Pulled into Tinian, and that's where I saw the submarine tender. And I knew my uncle, Bill Hayes, cousin Bill Hayes, was aboard a submarine tender somewhere.
Yeah.
So I got on the flashing light immediately and flashed over to the ship and asked if Bill Hayes was aboard that ship. And right away they flashed me back that he was.
Yeah, but I want you to pay attention to this right here. He swam on the same beach where the Enola Gay landed with the atomic canister. Now, you all know that the Enola Gay was an airplane that carried the first atomic bomb that bombed Hiroshima. Now here I pulled up a picture of the Enola Gay, the one that carried the atomic bomb and dropped it on Hiroshima. And here is another picture of the Enola Gay. And this is a picture of the atomic bomb after it was dropped on Hiroshima. And now we're on ocean crossing number 7, where he goes back from Guam to San Francisco. So he goes from Guam, right here, back to San Francisco. There's a Hawaiian Island, but they didn't stop. They just went right to the logbook on the ship says they could see it, but they didn't stop, and they went right back to San Francisco. And this was February 4th, 1945. Again, he was on the SS Catalina. Took him 17 days, 4 ships in the convoy, 1 destroyer escort, and 2 patrol boats. Now the ship's log says that the 4 ships As they were traveling, they got right about here, and the 4 other ships, they went down to Eteniwick Island, while the SS Catalina basically sailed alone to San Francisco. Now, after he got to San Francisco, he boarded a train, they call them troop trains, and he headed for the Armed Guard Center in Brooklyn, New York, to await further assignment. And this is probably the route that the train took, directly from San Francisco on the troop train, all the way up to the eastern seaboard and up to Brooklyn, New York, which is right there. This is probably a picture of my dad, I'm figuring, when he went to New York or Brooklyn and got a couple weeks leave before he got his next assignment. I'm thinking that this is the picture, but he wasn't sure. And this is my Aunt Claire right here. This is my Aunt Patty. This is my Uncle Richie, Uncle Norman, Grandma Thiel, Helen Thiel, and Fred Thiel Sr., who told my dad, when you go in the Navy, tell him that you want to go to school when you get a boot camp. You don't want to be a regular seaman swabbing decks. So he went to signal school. He learned how to be a signalman. Okay, we got ocean crossing number 8, where he leaves New York City and he travels to Naples, Italy. Okay, he travels from New York City, across the ocean, through the Rock of Gibraltar, up to Naples, Italy. It's April 8th, 1945, and he's on a new ship to him, the SS James Monroe. It takes him 19 days to cross the ocean. There's 29 ships in the convoy, 6 escorts, 2 destroyers, 2 destroyer escorts, 2 frigates, and 2 blimps. Here is an actual picture of the SS James Monroe. These were Liberty ships, and Liberty ships were built during the war and to liberate Europe. And I want you to notice the guns on the front. Here they got huge guns on the front and huge guns on the rear. And their hulls, when they went over to Europe, were full of supplies for the war effort in Europe. And this is a picture of the SS James Monroe after the war. And if you notice, they've taken the guns off. There's no guns. It's just a stripped down ship used for commercial use now. Again, here's just another picture of the convoys that might look like back in World War II. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the Rock of Gibraltar, which is right here, and the Mediterranean Sea, which is this area right here. Now, you can get in this little narrow passageway in the Rock of Gibraltar, but you can't. You go around here, you can't get out this way. Oh, let me go up here. Oh, I'm go up here. Nope, I can't get out there. And you just search all around, you can't get out. But however, you can get out right here, the Suez Canal right there. And you go out down this way, and you come out right there. So there's actually just 2 ways out, the Suez Canal and right by the Rock of Gibraltar. Now I'm going to show you some pictures of the Rock of Gibraltar. But before I do, I just want you to see a little bit how narrow that little inlet is into the Mediterranean Sea. Very narrow, in fact, as you can't even really see it. And here's a picture of the city of Gibraltar with the rock in the background. And here's another shot of the Rock of Gibraltar from a different angle. And another shot of the Rock of Gibraltar from a different angle. I've got one more for you to see. And that's probably what it looks like when you're approaching it to go through the narrow straits. And then after he landed in Naples, he departed Naples to go up to Leghorn, Italy, right there. That particular day was April 27th, 1945. He's on the SS James Monroe. Takes him 1 day to get there. 6 ships in the convoy, 3 escorts and a patrol boat. And it was 252 miles. And they laid over there for a little while. And they went back from Leghorn, back down to Naples, Italy, on May the 6th, 1945. Again, he's on the SS James Monroe. Took him 1 day, 3 ships in the convoy, 1 destroyer escort, and in this particular trip, he had 960 POWs in the hull of the ship. Going to unload them at Naples, Italy.
Come into Naples, Italy after crossing the Atlantic and unloaded our cargo, and we got further instructions to go up north to pick up some German prisoners that just had been captured in a battle. And we loaded the German prisoners aboard the ship. They were down into the hold. And on the way back to Naples, Italy, I wasn't the only sailor there, but a lot of us were exchanging cigarettes for articles that the German soldiers had on them, like medals, belt buckles, insignias, hats, pants, clothes, shirts.
What did you get? What did you get?
And I ended up getting a belt buckle with a German swastika embroidered, not embroidered, but emblazed on the buckle.
And you traded what?
I traded a pack of cigarettes for it.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we made the transfer, because in order to do it, you had to drop the cigarettes down into the hole, and somehow or other we got the belt buckle back up to the top. There must have been some way that we were able to exchange by rope or string or whatever.
Yeah.
Then he goes from Naples, Italy, travels the route down here, and he goes to Oran, Algeria. Now I've got Algiers there, but it's Algeria. Again, it's May 8th, 1945. He's on the SS James Monroe. Takes him 3 days to sail there. And again, he's got to go back through the Rock of Gibraltar to sail back to New York. Okay, we're on ocean crossing number 9 now, where he goes from Oran, Algeria, back to New York City. And he goes from Oran, Algeria, across the ocean to New York City. He's on the SS James Monroe. He's on 18 days it takes him. There's 37 ships in the convoy, 5 escorts, and 1 blimp. May 12th, 1945. 1 blimp. And here's a picture of a U.S. Navy blimp dogging one of the convoys. They didn't go out very far from land, but they did go out. They could see miles and miles around, so they acted as lookouts. But at some point they had to turn around and go back to land. Here would be another shot of a blimp over a convoy. And they're pretty close to land somewhere, I'm sure. And here's another blimp tethered over at the Rock of Gibraltar. as you can see there. And here's a picture of another blimp dogging the convoy, and this would be something my dad would do. He would be a signalman, signaling up to the blimp, and he's probably saying something like, "Hey John, got any cigarettes up there?" And John would say, "No, we don't smoke cigarettes on a blimp, you idiot." "Oh, okay, well I just thought I'd ask." "Okay, that's fine."
All I know is the coal was in the bottom of the ship and going across the Atlantic back in, coming into New York. We hit the hurricane, and the hurricane gave us a 60-degree roll, which is tipping areas for ships to tip over. And at that time, the captain, I don't know whether it was a merchant marine captain or the armed guard captain or the armed guard lieutenant, instructed everybody on duty down in the hole to shovel coal. The hurricane threw the ship over to a 60-degree roll, which is in virtual tipping over situation, and we didn't want it to continue that way, so the captain of the ship, the merchant marine captain, had everybody go down in the hole, shovel coal. And luckily I was on duty up on the bridge with earphones on my head, keeping in contact with the other ships in the convoy. And at that time, they got the coal back up, righted the ship enough so we could safely go through the hurricane. Probably still weren't on even keel.
Right. Okay, so after all that scared you.
Oh yes, scared me
heck
to
out of
death.
So it scared you enough to do what did you do when you got in?
When we got back into the Brooklyn, where we got transferred, all the Navy personnel got transferred off the James Monroe back into the Armed Guard Center for further assignment. And most of the time you go there, you get your next assignment would be another ship going back across the Atlantic. I didn't want to go back because I was too scared. So somehow or other I got a hold of somebody in authority, told him I'd like to get back to the Pacific. I'd like to be assigned to the Pacific. And the next thing I knew, I was going through the Panama Canal on an LST,
Right.
heading for Pearl Harbor for further amphibious training. So I went.
Okay, so we're now on ocean crossing number 10, and he's going to go from New York through the Panama Canal again to Hawaii. And the reason he's going to go to Hawaii is he's going to get further instructions on signaling procedures, because they're getting ready for the invasion of Japan. They're getting ready to drop the bomb on Japan, and they don't know if Japan's going to surrender or not, so they're amassing an invasion fleet over in Guam. But first he's going to go to Hawaii and get some more training. So he's going to travel from New York down by Cuba through the Panama Canal again, directly to Hawaii. Again, is for more schooling in signaling. It's June 1945. And he's on a LST ship. And again, it's for more schooling. Now here's an actual picture of an LST ship in Yokosuka Bay. As you can see, all the LST ships looks like in the background. And the front ends open up, so men can get in. They're in the hull here, and they go right up to shore and unload. These ramps pull down, and they unload all their equipment. And here's a closer picture of the front end there, like that. Like I say, the men and equipment are inside, and they just run up the beach and lower them down, and the men and equipment run out. Again, while he was in Hawaii, he trained in refresher courses in signaling. You know, he did not know it, but he was going to Guam, and he was going to be on that invasion of Japan if they didn't surrender after the atomic bomb was dropped. He leaves Hawaii and he sails for Guam, which is right there. He sailed on a destroyer this time, and the destination was Guam. Again, it was a staging area for the invasion of Japan, and this is August of 1945. And just to show you another picture of the destroyer, which he might have ridden on across from Hawaii to Guam. On August 6th, 1945, the Enola Gay dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan. 3 days later, another bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, Japan. So then, it's late August. My dad sailed to Japan as a unit to set up a communication system for incoming American fleet and the British fleet. So they sailed from Guam after the bomb was dropped and Japan surrendered. They sailed to Japan, which is right here, to this little spot right here called Yokosuka Bay. Yokosuka Bay is sometimes called Tokyo Bay. I'm going to focus in on this little area right here called Yokosuka Bay, and sometimes called Tokyo Bay. Here's the city of Tokyo. Sometimes it's called Yokosuka Bay, right here. Now, Dad said he was part of a team that sailed into the bay to set up communications before the American and British warships were going to sail in. And another quote from Dad says, after landing at Japan Yokosuka Bay Naval Base, I was part of the communication group stationed in the Tokyo Bay area for communicating between shore base and ships anchored in the harbor and ships entering these waters. I was among the first detached of signalmen and radio operators to arrive at the naval base after the surrender of Japan. Our mission was to establish immediate shore operations to Admiral Halsey's Task Force number 58 that was steaming into Yokosuka Bay. The signal tower was on top of the Japanese Port Director's building, which was on the west side of the bay. The signal towers were manned 24 hours. Blinker and flag signals were constantly being received and sent between the tower and ships anchored in the bay and those coming and leaving. This was my job for the next 10 months. And here's a quote and a story from my dad. He says, I remember clearly while steaming into Yokosuka Bay, on both sides looking up onto the hillside channel, every place that had Japanese gun emplacements had white flags flying from all the emplacements, indicating that the gun emplacements were no longer manned. The Japanese soldiers had fled.
Going down into Yokosuka Bay, on each side of us, you could see the cliffs on the right side, cliffs on the left side, and every place you looked, there was a white flag. And that's where all the gun emplacements were, prepared to repel the United States Navy from coming in there.
Okay.
So,
Scare you?
well, at that time, no, it
Yeah.
didn't scare me, because
Yeah.
I had no idea what we were doing. All I knew was a big landmark ahead of us, and I had no idea it was even Japan.
Was that an eerie feeling?
Well, yes, it was.
Yeah.
But being an enlisted man, enlisted men just don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
So
right.
officers that knew
Right,
where
right,
we were
yeah.
going, and sometimes they would tell us, and sometimes they wouldn't.
Yeah.
So they loaded all the signalmen and the radiomen aboard these LST ships where the landing trap would fall down, and we would get out on the beaches, and we were one of the first and first group of naval personnel to hit the Japanese shore, evidently, from what I remember. But they dropped the ramp down, and we come out, and all the Japanese soldiers and sailors at Yokosuka Bay were all lined up on the shore, and as we come out, they all bowed to us.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't hear this story.
Yeah, they bowed to us, and I mean, it made your heart beat fast to think that this
How
would
many
happen.
was it? Lots of them?
Oh, there was a lot of them.
Really?
A lot of sailors and soldiers. Whatever the Japanese naval base force consisted of, we had no. Although there was sailors and soldiers and officers.
Okay, tell me about the gunnery.
After he got set up, he was on this particular point here, all set up, and as Admiral Halsey's fleet sailed into the bay, he was the signalman guiding them into the bay, telling them where they would be going according to what his supervisors, his officers told him. So right now I want to pay attention to this little place right here. Right here is where the current Japanese have their Navy ships stored. So I just want to show you a couple things here. Right here we have 3 submarines sitting there. And over here we have a few warships of sorts. Right here. Over here we have several warships docked. And over here we have an aircraft carrier. But that's not the most interesting thing I found while I was looking around. Right here I found 2 baseball fields right here and a football field right here. Now I'm going to zoom in on this football field, and I want you to pay very close attention to the names on the football field. Yeah, look at that, isn't that something? Seahawks. And down at the other end we have Yokosuka. So apparently when the satellite picture was taken, the Seahawks were playing Yokosuka. Another quote from my dad says, "Another event that really sticks out in my mind is that we were able to watch from the top of the signal tower H1 in Yokosuka Bay with a pair of binoculars glued to our eyes the ceremonial surrender of the Japanese, which was taking place on the deck of the USS Missouri. That event will live on in my mind forever." And there is a picture of the USS Missouri. Notice the really big guns on that thing. They're huge.
At the time of the surrender of the Imperial Japanese Navy fleet that took place aboard the USS Missouri, luckily I happened to be on duty at that time, and I was up on the tower, and I could watch. Me and other signalmen that were available all had our glasses on. We were watching the surrender of the Japanese Empire to the United States Navy.
Right on that USS Missouri.
Right on the USS Missouri. And the USS Missouri was stationed, so we were looking right up at the stern.
Oh, really?
And there's another picture of the USS Missouri. There's the big guns, and there's all these sailors on deck. They are anchored in Yokosuka Bay, getting ready for the Japanese to sign the surrender papers. And here is a picture on board the USS Missouri, and these are the Japanese delegates here, and each one of them will walk forward and sign the surrender. And I'm thinking that each one of these guys are probably a head of some sort of War Department. And this actually back here looks like General MacArthur. I'm not sure though. And this is another ceremonial picture taken on the deck of the USS Missouri. After all this, I was transferred to the USS Yuma seagoing tugboat based in the bay. Our job was to tow Japanese ships and submarines out to sea and to be used for target practice by the U.S. Navy. Fred Thiel, Seaman First Class. And here's a actual picture of that seagoing tug, the USS Yuma, number 94. And he said he would be up on the deck sometimes signaling here, and sometimes he'd be up in this crow tower right here, but never up here. And these are some of the sailor pictures just hanging out, looks like. One of the ships was the pride of the Japanese Navy. The Nagato was towed out to sea and used as target practice with a nuclear bomb. Most people don't know that, but it's true. Here's a picture of the Nagato, the pride of the Japanese fleet. Now, Dad, did you actually tow that ship out?
I don't remember. We towed out so many ships that they were just like eating cereal in the morning, didn't pay any attention to it.
And here's an actual picture of the Nagato being blown up by the nuclear bomb. And if you notice real close, right in this area here, there's some actual ships around this blast. Actually looks like some ships right here in this vicinity and this vicinity here, that close. And on this side, there's definitely a ship there and a couple there, probably saying, hey, it looks like we're a little too close to this. What do you think, John? I don't know. I never have been around a nuclear bomb before. Actually, these are probably ships that were towed out earlier to be used as target practice with conventional torpedoes and weapons. And this is his certificate of authenticity that he participated. Task Force 31, be it known to all to whom these presents may come that Fredrick J Thiel Jr., as a member of the Tokyo Bay Occupation Force TF-31, participated in the initial landing and occupation of the Tokyo Bay area and the capture of the HIJMS Nagato, which act symbolized the unconditional and complete surrender of the Japanese Navy. 30th of August, 1945, signed by a Brigadier General, the commanding officer, and Rear Admiral. On March 11th, 1946, the Yuma, the USS seagoing tug Yuma, departed Yokosuka Bay for Hawaii, towing barracks towing a barracks barge. And first class seaman Fred Thiel was on board. And here's what a couple barracks barges look like. The men, the Navy men or Army men or Marines would stay in these barges offshore and not live on shore. And here's a picture of another one. And this is a picture of how they would ferry the troops from the land out to the barracks barges for them to stay in overnight. And then in the morning it would be the reverse order. And there's a picture of the amphibious vehicles parked overnight, probably waiting to take them in the morning or vice versa. Okay, now we're on ocean crossing number 11 from Japan to San Francisco with a stop in Hawaii. And so he goes from Japan to Hawaii, towing the barracks barge. And in Hawaii, he boards a troop-carrying ship, the USS Rutland, bound for San Francisco, then by train overland to Boston to be discharged from the Navy. And here's a picture of the USS Rutland, number 192. And as you can see, there's troops on board all over the ship there, just hanging out. And this could be the one that's on the way to Hawaii, but this is the USS Rutland. And they travel on the Rutland from Hawaii to San Francisco and get off at San Francisco. And on May 27th, 1946, he was discharged from the Navy. First, he traveled by train, the second trip across the USA, traveled from San Francisco, crossed up the eastern seaboard up to Boston, where he was discharged from the Navy. And these are the medals he got while he was in World War II. He got a medal for the American campaign. He got a medal for the European, African, Middle Eastern campaign. He got a medal for Atlantic Pacific campaign, and he got a medal for being in World War II, and he got a medal for occupation service while he was in Yokosuka Bay, and he got his dog tags.